Syntax in English is the arrangement of words and phrases in a specific order. If you can change the position of even one word, it's possible to change the meaning of the entire sentence. Syntax in linguistics refers to the arrangement of words and phrases. Syntax covers topics like word order and grammar rules such as subject-verb agreement or the correct placement of direct and indirect objects.
What is syntax? Linguists use the term syntax in two different ways. They use it as a name for the subdiscipline that studies sentence structure, and they use it as a name for the phenomenon that we're studying. That is, part of the grammar that results in sentences. Having two usages like this is common. For example, the term chemistry can both refer to the scientific discipline that studies chemistry, such as the chemistry department, and it also refers to the thing we're studying, as in the chemistry of a liquid. As a discipline, syntax is defined as a science. Syntacticians investigate the principles of how words and phrases are put together into sentences using the scientific method.
Here are the examples to describe syntax. Only Batman fights crime, meaning Batman is the only person who fights crime. No one except Batman fights crime, not even Superman. Another one is Batman only fights crime, meaning fighting crime is the only thing Batman does. He doesn't work, he doesn't shower. Fighting crime is all whatever that he does. As you can see in the example above, how moving a word able to change the entire sentence.
A complete sentence has two parts. One part we call the subject, and the other part we call a predicate. The subject is the naming part of the sentence, while the predicate is the telling part. To find the subject in a sentence, I need to ask myself who or what the sentence is about. To find out where the predicate is, I need to ask myself, what is the subject doing? The dog chased after the ball. First, I ask myself who or what is the sentence about, and I know it's about the dog, so that means the dog is the subject. Now, what is the dog doing? He chased after the ball, so chased after the ball is the predicate.
Next, we have essential rules of syntax. There are 4 essential rules of syntax. First and foremost, we have subject. Subject is who or what the sentence is about. It consists of noun, pronoun, or noun phrase. Second, we have predicate. Predicate is the telling part of a sentence that shows its relation to the subject. It usually consists of finite verb. For your additional information, finite verb is a verb that related to the subject in person or number, which shows the tense of the sentence. Third, we have sentence. Sentence is the largest unit of grammatical organization, which parts of speech and grammatical rules are said to be function. Generally, it is best for a sentence to have one idea. If there are multiple ideas, it is better to split them up into multiple sentences. For instance, Jeremy ate food. I sat at the couch. Lastly, we have clause. Clause is a group of words that form a grammatical unit and contain a subject and also a predicate. There are 2 types of clause, which are independent clause and dependent clause. Independent clause is a clause that can stand alone as a complete simple sentence. There is no part of sentence depend on some element expressed outside the sentence. In contrast, dependent clause is a clause that does not form a simple sentence by itself. It is connected to the main clause of a sentence by a conjunction. Moving on, we have phrase structure rules. It is a component that generates the basic sentence patterns of a language. These are the components and their function.
Since both of these phrases have a noun in them, we'll call them noun phrases. The word the, by the way, is part of a class of words that linguists call determiners, which also includes words like this, my, one, and every. Determiners help us figure out which specific instance of a specific noun we're talking about. There's one theory of syntax that actually argues there are determiner phrases as well as noun phrases. Either way, these small words do a big job. So let's label our tree with the phrases and word classes to keep track of all of this information. And the whole thing, as we already know, is a sentence. Writing out noun phrase and verb phrase every time gets kind of tedious, so linguists generally abbreviate these as NP and VP. And the same goes with N for noun, V for verb, and S for sentence, plus det for determiner. Tree diagrams let us see the predicate relationship we talked about in the last episode. The verb and object noun phrase are both together within the VP. Even in languages that put their words in a different order, the verb and the object still have this closer relationship.
Now that you've understood what each symbol is, let's take a look at the rules and what makes a tree diagram. So as for rule number 1 and 2, we've learned this in school actually, which is what makes a sentence. So subject and predicate. Done. You've basically mastered rule number 1 and 2. But one thing to remember, there are instances where before the sentence, the S, there is a sentence modifier, the SM. SM is words like perhaps, maybe, yes, no. So an example I can give you is perhaps the man works at home. So now that we have the S, let's build a tree diagram of it. So perhaps the man works at home. First we need to establish which is which. So SM, perhaps, subject, the man, predicate, works at home. So the tree diagram you see in the slides is not yet completed. Why? Because like my groupmate mentioned, there is a triangle. Moving on to number 3 and 4. So basically 3 and 4 is renaming subject to NP. So instead of writing subject, we are using the term noun phrase. So what was our subject just now? The man. So the man is an NP. We now know subject is NP. So for rule 4, there are 2 options in writing NP. Let's talk about the second one. NP can be just a pronoun, which means it can be just one word, like he, she, I, you, and so on. As for the first option, NP can be expanded in multiple ways. NP also functions as subjects, objects, and predicate. So one sentence, I'm going to give an example, is all the 2 very young women in brown coats. You can see in that sentence there are up to 3 words of determiner, which is all the 2. And then after all the 2 comes a preceding adjective phrase, which is very young. And then after very young is women, which is a plural inflection of noun. And then after that is a prepositional phrase, which is in brown coats.
So the adjective phrase has as its head an adjective, say big. Now this adjective can be modified by an adverb phrase. Take for example very. What about prepositional phrases or PPs? A PP consists of an obligatory preposition followed by a noun phrase, like for example, in the car. And this triangle here is just a very short way of drawing a noun phrase if you're lazy.
Rule 5 focuses on an adjective phrase. If we look in the picture above, it consists of intensifier, or also called as adverb phrase, adjective, and preposition phrase. Adjective is written in bold form because it is a must-have, while intensifiers and preposition phrase are optional, means either or both can be added. This is why in Rule 5, a few forms can be formed in order to build the tree diagram. Rule 6 focuses on preposition phrase. It consists of a preposition and a noun phrase. Both are must-have, which leads to only one form can be formed in order to build the tree diagram. Rule 7 focuses on predicate. It consists of auxiliary, verb phrase, and adverbial. Auxiliary and verb phrase are a must-have, while adverbial is optional, means can be added or not in the form to build the tree diagram.
Simple sentence. Simple sentences contain one independent clause. It contains a subject and a verb. For example, she brushes her teeth in the morning. The baby laughed. Compound sentence. Compound sentences contain 2 independent clauses and are linked by a coordinating conjunction. Coordinating conjunctions can include for, and, nor, but, or, yet, and so. For example, she brushes her teeth in the morning, so her teeth are nice and clean. Here, we can see the sentence without the coordinating conjunction. We have two independent clauses that each make sense on their own as separate sentences. Another example is, the baby laughed at the cartoon and he played with his toys. It's important to note that we use commas before the coordinating conjunction.
According to the YouTube video, I do agree that simple sentence has a single independent clause. An independent clause is a group of words that contain both a subject and a predicate that expresses a complete sentence. For example, she works out in the morning. The sentence contains a subject, which is she, and a predicate, workouts in the morning. Some guess to the second example. Sophia loves cherries. Sophia indicates the subject of the sentence. Loves the cherries represent the predicate. Next, I would like to address my thought on another sentence types, which is compound sentence. As shown in the previous video, I do not agree on the statement of compound sentence contain only two independent clauses. In fact, compound sentence can be contained of two or three independent clauses connected by a coordinating conjunction, for example, for, nor, but, yet, so, etc. For example, Lily is happy but Mary is sad. This example consists of two independent clauses. Even though Joe likes golf, he played a cricket at the weekend. He enjoyed it very much. This example consists of three independent clauses.
Complex sentences contain one independent clause and one or more subordinate clause. Subordinate clauses are linked by either a subordinating conjunction, for example, although, after, because, since, when, etc., or a relative pronoun, for example, who, which, that, and many more. Examples of complex sentences include, she brushes her teeth in the morning after waking up. As you can see, we have our independent clause, which can make sense on its own as a separate sentence, and then the dependent clause, which is after waking up. This wouldn't make sense on its own as a sentence. Compound complex sentences contain two or more independent clauses and one or more dependent clause that is linked with a coordinating conjunction. For example, I woke up in the morning and I brushed my teeth even though everyone else was sleeping. Here we can see the independent clauses and the dependent clause.
A complex sentence consists of an independent clause and one or more dependent clauses joined by a subordinating conjunction like although, because, so, that, and until. What's a dependent clause? Also known as a subordinating clause, it is a clause that cannot stand on its own. It needs to connect with an independent clause using a conjunction or a relative pronoun. For example, although it was raining, she decided to go for a run. She decided to go for a run is an independent clause. Although it was raining is the dependent clause, and although is the subordinating conjunction. Compound complex sentences consist of multiple independent clauses, as well as having at least one dependent clause. And this sentence, after work, she went to the gym, is the first independent clause, and completed her workout is the second independent clause. Because staying fit is important to her is the dependent clause of the sentence.
Hello to my fellow classmates. My name is Nur Al-Safakiha binti Adnan and my matrix number is A200237. For my part, I will talk about the ways to use syntax and the importance of it. But before I start, let's watch this video that I found and prepared for you guys.
Subject, verb, object. Meaning that in every sentence, your subject comes first, followed by the verb and object. For example, if you're writing a piece about a fugitive on the run named Fred, and how his running is just making it harder for him to be seen as not guilty. This is the right way to put it. Fred is making this harder and sealing his fate as a guilty party before the whole world by running. However, some people would write this as, by running, Fred is making this harder and sealing his fate as guilty before the whole world. The problem with the second statement is that it has messed up the syntax order by making the verb running the subject of the statement. Although it can be argued that the message in both sentences is still the same, the problem is that the second statement forces your reader to focus on running instead of the subject of the sentence, Fred.
As you guys can see, using syntax is actually pretty important to help us understand how sentences work. Besides being critical to conveying literal sense, syntax is also one of the key tools writers use to express meaning in a variety of different ways. That is why syntax can help writers to produce rhetorical and aesthetics effect. By varying the syntax of their sentences, writers are able to produce a different rhetorical and aesthetic effects. How a writer manipulates the syntax of their sentence is an important element of writing style. Next, syntax can help to control pace and mood. Manipulating syntax is one of the ways writers control the pace and mood of their prose. For example, the writer Ernest Hemingway is known for his short, declarative sentences, which were well suited to his simple, clear style of writing. This gives his prose a forceful and direct quality. And lastly, it can also help to create atmosphere. By contrast, Hemingway's fellow story writer and novelist William Faulkner is famous or infamous for his meandering, paragraph-long sentences, which often mimic the ruminative thinking of his characters. These sentences, which often ignore the standard rules of his punctuation and grammar, help create an atmosphere as much as they convey information. And with that being said, all writers actually vary their sentence structure from time to time because using a variety of sentences is one of the key ways writers engage and maintaining their readers' interest. That will be all from me. Thank you and see you soon.
The most common way to use semicolons is to join two main clauses. And a main clause is just something that could be a sentence all by itself. And they have to be related in meaning some way. So you can say, I got a sweater. It's cold in my office. So I got a sweater is one sentence, one main clause, and it's cold in my office is another sentence, another main clause. And boop, you can just join them together with a semicolon and nothing else.
Every sentence ever written is an example of syntax, since syntax is the arrangement of words and phrases. But first, let's look at a few notable literary examples to gain a sense of how writers utilize syntax to communicate meaning. Anna Karenina is the novel by the Russian author Leo Tolstoy. It was first published in the book form in 1878. In his book, Tolstoy wrote, "Happy families are all alike. Every unhappy family is unhappy in its own way." This is two basic statements connected by a semicolon. Tolstoy might have simply written them as distinct sentences, but by combining them into one, he demonstrates that these two ideas are related and balanced. For the next example, we have Frankenstein or the Modern Prometheus, written by Mary Shelley in 1818. The author wrote, "The world was to me a secret which I desired to discover. To her, it was a vacancy which she sought to people with imaginations of her own." This employs a semicolon to compare the characteristics of two characters. The parallelism to me to her emphasizes this comparison.
He has what his father had. His father has what he had. Because of syntax, it is possible to have two sentences with the exact same words but two different meanings. In this case, if you want to get more imaginative, you can think of syntax as a dimension, as an extra dimension that sits on top of these words and constructs a particular relationship between the words. Sometimes you may actually have two sentences with two different orders that mean the exact same thing. You see, you had two sentences with the same words, different orders meaning two different things, but here you have two sentences with this exact same words and different orders, but they still mean the same thing. So here syntax allows us to have the same interpretation of two different word orders.
He has what his father had, and his father has what he had. As you can see, the change in these sentences was only minor, but it brings a whole new interpretation to the sentence. The first sentence contained he as the subject, but the second sentence contained his father as the subject. The same words are used here, but changing the word order completely alters the meaning. This is because the subject is functioning as the phrasal head, which the constituent is built, determines the grammatical properties of its constituent. This is syntax in action, determining the roles of he and his father in these scenarios. Then how about this? The judge swore in the new citizens, and the judge swore the new citizens in. As for these two sentences, they had same subject, which is the judge. The two different positions of the word in are used just to shift the stress. So both of these sentences had the same meaning. Thank you.
It is important to learn syntax because syntax skills help us to understand how sentences work, the meaning behind the word order, structure, and punctuation. By providing support for developing syntax skills, it helps to increase students' comprehension and complex text even more.